So let's start by exploring the Photoshop program and first learning how to open a file and all the variables that you need to think of when you open a file. So when you open the Photoshop, you can either hit Create New or File New. I usually do File New. So this is how you're going to start a project. This is your first step, File New. And then you have some choices, okay? This can be pretty confusing, so I want to walk you through some of the choices. Um, these are preset settings or settings you commonly use on, say, like the size of your piece of paper. You can imagine that each of these is a different size of piece of paper that you might want to work on. Now, usually what I work on is I like to work on things that are usually actually the size of a paper. So you want to come over here, and in mine it's preset to pixels. Change this to inches, okay? And we can change this as width 8.5, which is 8.5 by height 11 inches. That's the size of a standard piece of paper. Okay. Now, you're not done yet. If you were to just hit create right now, what's going to happen is you're going to start a file, and the resolution of that file, meaning how many pixels are preloaded into that set area, is going to be super small, 72. Resolution of 72 pixels per inch, or you might also have heard this as DPI, dots per inch. That's really, really low. That's really bad. Okay, so when I make artistic illustrations or figures, the minimum, the very, very minimum resolution you want is 300 pixels per inch. Okay, and if I'm doing a figure for like a paper or something that's going to be used in a professional context, and I have enough computational power, oftentimes I'll do double that. I'll do 600 pixels per inch, because then I know that I can make my image and I can shrink it down. And usually what happens is after you shrink things, it becomes sharper. So when I set my dots per inch, if my computer can handle it, I'll do 600. But you guys at the very minimum, and the requirement for all your assignments is at minimum 300 pixels per inch. Okay, so if we want to now open this file, that's all we need to do. We just set the height, the width, and the resolution, and then we can hit create, and that should open us up. Maybe. There we go. Our what we could call our canvas or our piece of paper, the thing that we want to work on. Now imagine we make some marks. Oh, let's get the brush tool. Imagine we make some marks on this image. Here's a monster. Imagine we make some kind of an image. Now the other point of files is not just starting files, but saving the files. Okay, you want to save your files, otherwise you're going to lose your projects. And once you save it, you can always come back to it. You can reopen it, you can re-edit it, you can change it, you can modify it, etc. Okay, so after you're done with your project, or after you're done with a work session, and also during your work session, you want to periodically save so you don't lose your work. Okay, so let me show you quick how to save a file. File, save as. Now, obviously, so I'm just going to save this on my desktop. Obviously, we can just give this a name, file name. Let's call this example save. Okay. Now, the default Photoshop file is not this PDF. Do not save your files as a PDF. Okay. You know PDFs from your experience in the university. PDFs are for like reading material. Do not save your file as a PDF. There is a file called the default Photoshop file. Photoshop, okay? It's called .psd. The .psd means it's saved in the Photoshop file format. None of the information is lost. And you can come back to this and work in it again and again and again in Photoshop. So you always want to save a .psd. If you save in any other file type, it's likely that you're going to lose some information, meaning you might lose your layers, which we'll talk about in the next few lectures. You might lose some of your marks. You might lose some of your sharpness. You might not come back to it and be able to edit it. It might make things permanent. So you always want to save your files as a .psd. So if we wanted to do that, we could do that. Now, you can't export, say, like a .psd file online. You can't like post it in, say, like a website or something like that. The .psd file is only for Photoshop, okay? It's only for opening up and working with your file in Photoshop. So if I want to save this into something that I might want to post online, you have to save it in a different format, okay? So we would say example save format 2. And now you have some options to choose from. You could save it as a JPEG. Okay, JPEG is a standard image file. You could save it as a .png. That's a standard image file. You could save it as a TIFF. That's a standard image file. If it was something I would want people to read, I might save it as a PDF, and I might combine and make it into an actual PDF document. And just so that you're aware, in Adobe Illustrator, there's also a file type called .ai, which is an Adobe Illustrator file. That's kind of like the .psd, but in the Illustrator format. So if I wanted to save this as a JPEG, I could save it as a JPEG. It's going to ask me these questions. I usually save it at the maximum quality 10, hit OK, and now it should have saved onto my desktop. It was example. Here's the .psd file. Here's what they look like. Okay, and let me show you what the JPEG look like if I can find it. Here it is. So this is the JPEG. If I open this up, it should go into a photo, essentially, viewing system. So this is the .jpeg file. This could be uploaded online. And if I ever want to go back to that project, let me just show you. Let me just close this. If I ever want to go back to that project, I can just click on the PSD file, and it should reopen it exactly how it was when I left it, when I saved it. And there you have it. So that's how to open up a file and save a file.